So we're back on. So I remember you telling me a story once about being in New Orleans with a Fulbright lawyer who, I think it involved hurricane drinks. Do you remember that?
That was when we were negotiating with our plant in Birmingham, and they brought a lawyer, so I had to bring a lawyer. And so Larry Clinton came with me, and we flew back to New Orleans, and then we had some time on our hands, so we went down to Bourbon Street and had a couple of hurricanes. And then we flew back to Houston, and I can still remember carrying my hurricane on board the airplane. And so I hid it when I came home, but Betsy found it.
Okay, too funny. And then I remember also you're mentioning that you wanted to keep your family relations in Mexico quiet because you were worried that Anderson Clayton would send you down there.
Right.
So
that was the big secret. And I didn't want anybody Anderson Clayton to know that I had relatives in Mexico, because it was a big subsidiary, and it manufactured all kinds of products, but there were many management positions open there, and I was scared that they might want to send me down there.
And then when I first met you, you were the senior vice president in charge of long range planning, I think. Is that right?
At Anderson Clayton,
Yeah.
yes.
And so I think by then Anderson Clayton was not only in the cotton business, but they were in a lot of other businesses.
Right, and the cotton business was disappearing because of government programs, and they basically said to all our subsidiaries that you had to find a new business to be in or close down. So
What did the government do to kill the cotton business?
they made loans to the cotton business to bales of cotton, and at very low rates, and it basically took away the margin on which merchants had relied.
Okay. So you were a part of a team, and maybe in charge of the team, I think, that bought some businesses.
In charge of the team, I bought for Anderson Clayton. I bought our biggest ones were American Founders Life Insurance Company in Austin, Texas, and Igloo, which was stationed outside of Houston, and Gaines Food, which were a national company in the food business, pet foods.
And of course, you were also involved in selling yourself.
Right. And selling all our subsidiaries, which didn't make sense to be in.
Right.
For example, we sold ACO seed to Cargill, and we sold a Gulf Atlantic Warehouse Company to various people. And I remember when we were dealing with American Founders on the sale of it, I didn't trust the people we were dealing with, and I told my superiors at Anderson Clayton that we should not deal with them. And actually, within a year after they bought us, because they were all cash, and they were the highest bitter. They went bankrupt,
Mm.
and the principals went to jail.
Oh wow. So, what was the favorite part of your career? Was it the part of buying and selling, or was it, just like as a trial lawyer? My favorite part is trying cases, and not so much the other stuff. But
I think my favorite part was buying and selling things, but I was also involved in the long range planning of each division. So I got to visit each division and fairly often, and helped with their long range plans.
and you were at Anderson Clayton, what, 35 years?
35 years.
My memory's better than even I thought. And I remember you were involved in the sale of Anderson Clayton
Right.
pretty much right after Elizabeth and I got married,
Right.
86, 87.
Right.
I remember a couple things. One is I remember for one Easter, you had all these shrunken heads from Brazil, and you had gone to, I think, Brazil for business.
Yeah.
What was that about?
We had major subsidiaries in Brazil and Mexico, and they were in all different businesses. And when I went to Brazil, one of the things one would look for were shrunken heads.
They look kind of real. Hopefully they weren't real. And the other thing I remember is those little bottles of liquor that you get on the airplane.
Right.
You obviously used to take all those.
Right. I can remember one hostess who gave me probably 10 bottles because she liked me.
Excellent. And then another funny story about that time was you were doing a hundreds of millions of dollars a deal, and by now you have Baker Botts as your lawyers, and you said that in the final papers it said that the seller was going to pay to the buyer all this money.
Yes.
And you caught the typo. What did he say in response?
He said, "Whoops, whoops."
I thought he said, "Picky, picky, picky."
Picky, picky.
That's
But
funny.
you're right.
And then, had you ever thought about leaving Anderson Clayton at any point? Because
No, I was scared that they would fire me because Fenton Getty, when he came as president from outside to Anderson Clayton, he fired within a year or two. He fired everybody who worked for him except for me.
was he the boss that you didn't like so much?
Right.
Yeah.
But we got along
Yeah, well enough.
well enough, and eventually he accommodated me rather than the other way around.
Nice.
After he came here, he first of all had somebody at the accounting department check all my expense accounts, and making sure that he could fire me if there was anything wrong in them, and of course there was not.
Right.
But then they hired Booz Allen, who was an investment company that specialized in advising clients, and it's very seldom that the vice president in corporate planning survives there. But after around 6 months of their fiddling around, I wrote a ghost letter for Jim Barlow to sign, firing them because they'd done such a poor job.
Oh, nice. What year was this? Do you remember? Was this in the 70s or 80s or
And I think that was in the 80s.
in the 80s? Well, now family lore has it that you worked with another Harvard business grad named Fayez Serafin.
Fayez was at Anderson Clayton when I started with him. He was a year older, and he'd also been the Harvard Business School, and when he left Anderson Clayton, he asked me if I would join him in the investment business. But at that point, I had a wife and had a couple of children to support, and I decided not to. But it was one of the greatest mistakes I've made in my life.
Well, you say that, but I remember talking. I mean, I'm asking you stories that I've heard before, just for the sake of the extended family. But I remember you didn't think it was a big mistake. That you were pretty happy with, you know. I mean, obviously, you probably have your own jet airplane, but who needs that?
Right.
And then, so kind of turning away from the work side, you know, what was, and before I get into your meeting Betsy and family, what was Houston like back in the 50s and 60s? Was it I'm sure it was a remarkably different than certainly Cambridge, Massachusetts, but what about as compared to Memphis?
And it was about very similar to Memphis, and both of them had around 400,000 people in them, and now Memphis has around 800,000, and Houston, of course, is about 6 or 7 million.
Right.
So times have changed.
Yeah. So when you were here, though, you didn't feel like it was like a cowboy town or anything?
No.
Because, you know, in 1967, my grandfather and grandmother came to Houston for the Cassius Clay, Ernie Terrell fight in the Astrodome.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that trip because they brought me back a lasso.
Really?
And I proceeded to break things in the house and get yelled at. I was a small boy. I was 6. But so that was kind of my image of Houston. And then a postcard that they also brought back, you know, had maybe one tall building downtown. And now it's so different.
When I got to Houston, a couple of my friends, of my parents' friends in Memphis, knew the right people in Houston, so I would put on the invitation list, which was a big deal in those days.
Right.
And as a result, I got to meet all the right people within a very short time when I came here.
Well, I would think someone, you know, having gone to Harvard and been in the military and being a little older, probably you struck a pretty nice figure in the social circles of Houston.
No question about it.
So of all the choices you could have had, why Betsy? What about her turned your head?
Actually, I had several different girlfriends in Houston. Francina Stewart, Margaret Anderson, Mary what? Mary, and it doesn't matter.
But who's counting? But what about Betsy?
Well, Betsy obviously struck a chord in my memory bank, and at that time I was living with St. John Garwood in Mr. Clayton's guest house, so I was well connected.
And I know the famous meeting was at Kay's Lounge, which
That's right.
existed until really probably just 10 years ago, and Elizabeth and I used to go there when we were dating.
Right.
And of course, the everyone likes to joke that Betsy was not of the legal drinking age, and she's quick to add that she wasn't drinking anyway.
Right.
So how did mutual friends introduce you, or did you introduce yourself, or?
I think we met at a party somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and
So, yeah, and then met again at the bar.
and I think we met first of all with mutual friends at the Kay's bar,
Mm-hmm.
but they were part of the social scene
Mm-hmm.
in Houston.
Right. So So you both came well recommended to each other,
Right.
but like what made Betsy stand out versus the other women that you were dating?
Well, she obviously she has turned out to be a wonderful wife and mother, and fantastic in all respects.
And you,
But
yeah, go. I'm sorry, go ahead.
but I don't know what attracted to me
Uh-huh.
in the first place, but she was by far the best of anyone I met in Houston.
Oh, that's awesome. So you guys have done pretty well. 66 years, right?
65 years.
Okay. And it'll be 66 in July.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a long time.
It is indeed.
So you know you've obviously had 7 wonderful kids, now grown-ups, and of course the family is growing leaps and bounds all the time, and I'm so proud to be a member of your family. What did you set out to have a lot of kids, or did it just sort of happen that way?
It happened. In fact, I remember Gaylord Fauntleroy saying to us, to the two of us, "Surely you know where babies come from."
And that's funny. Betsy joked once that I thought was so funny that you were talking about something or other, and she said, "Oh, that y'all were eating steaks," and she said, "Merrill, I was throwing up for the first 8 years of our marriage," or something like that. Because she was always pregnant.
Yeah.
So, tell me about like family trips. So I know of the famous trip where you drove to Mexico in a station wagon, and apparently William threw up in the back.
Well,
Or did you? That's right, because Granny and Dean flew down, and then you
Right.
all drove, right?
right. That was several years after we were married, and actually the first trip I took with Betsy was to Canada, where we went skiing at Chalet Cochon
Mm.
with some family members. And then my second one on her 30th birthday. Wow. Yeah. We went to Europe and spent 3 weeks traipsing around. We started in London, went to Paris, went to Germany, went to Damascus, went to Beirut, went to Jerusalem,
Mm.
and also Cairo.
And that was for her 30th birthday.
That was her 30th birthday.
Wow, that's and how long were you? 2 weeks? Was that a 2-week trip?
I think that was at least 3 weeks.
Mm.
I remember my boss, Burke Baker, who was president of Gulf Atlantic at the time. He said, even though you're personnel director, if you'd like a fourth week, we can arrange it. And I told him on the salary I'm making here that I can only afford 3 weeks.
That's funny. And so I know Elizabeth talks about the trip to Mexico, and she talks about the trip to Europe. You took the kids to some pretty good trips.
Right.
So I'm kind of changing gears a little bit, but don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would love to hear from your point of view, like a funny story or something about each of your children that you remember, either something poignant or something you were especially excited for them about, or funny, and maybe we can table this for the next time if you want to think about it, but just trying to get your reaction.
Walter was the 8th wonder of the world when he made the Olympics in 1976, and I wrote about it, and it was a fantastic experience for me. By the time I was a vice president of Anderson Clayton, I had business in Hartford, Connecticut, and so I went up for the opening after I had done my business in Hartford, and then I came back for the last two races, and they were the most exciting things in the world. And when the best team you could do would be 7 points, but with their 26 competitors and a 3-hour race, typically the winner would be in the 40s, and the last race, Richard had figured out we only could win if we came in first, and the Russians behind us, and then
I think it was
East Germany.
Oh, okay.
And Norway in 5th or 6th place. And when we came around the first marker, everybody was where they should be. And we came around the 4th marker, and the Russians were in first place, and so we had lost everything. And then here they came across the finish line, and we were in first place. The Russians were in first, were in second place, and the Germans and
the Norwegians, I guess.
Norwegians were in 5th or 6th place, but if they came in 5th, they would win the gold, and if they came in 6th, we would win the gold. But we knew we would win something.
Oh, that's exciting.
And so it was most exciting.
You wrote a poem, I think, about that, right? Or just a letter, maybe just a letter, but it's beautifully written. It really is. You're a really good writer, Merrill. I think that's probably one of maybe your unknown talents, is what a brilliant writer you are. Of course, you spent your life in business where you didn't have to write like you've done for pleasure, but it's that letter is one example of how good I think you write.
That was about a 5-page article, I think.
Yeah.
That I wrote.
And then I know that was when, back in the mid-'70s, was when streaking was popular, and apparently there was a streaker at the opening ceremony, and Betsy was afraid it might be Walter, but it wasn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Okay. So what about some of the other kids?
I think I'll put that off.
Okay, so we'll do that next time. So you think about that.
Right.
So we've been going almost 30 minutes. And I'm thinking that for our viewers at home, 30-minute segments are probably more doable than the hour that we first did.
I think that's
So,
probably right.
so I think, so let's stop now. And then next time, I would like to kind of talk about each of your children. And then, you know, I may throw it open to questions. I know Walter Glasgow had one question. We have a few more minutes before we quit. He said, ask Dad about gambling at Harvard.
Really?
Yeah. So what in the world is he talking about?
I ran my own roulette wheel at Harvard, where I even changed the rules so that I could never fail.
How did you change the rules so you could never fail?
Because if somebody had a hot streak, I would cut them off after they won, say, $25.
But the house never loses, right?
And,
Did you have a good number of people playing?
yes, a zero and double zero, which helps the house odds also.
Oh, that's funny. So how did you did you make a roulette wheel or did you buy one or?
No, I thought I bought one.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, we'll stop for today, and then we'll keep going until we run out of things to talk about, huh?
Okay, sounds a good deal to me.
Okay.